Well, I'm gonna start the meeting and welcome everybody and speak really slowly to get our last two council members back in here. But I want to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Charlotte City Council, May the 1st. Happy May. We're all eager to hear the manager's recommended budget. I want to remind folks of a few items, and we appreciate our guests and visitors. We are going to be hearing the recommended budget. We are not going to be asking questions from either the public or from the council. This is for us to listen and hear, and I want to remind folks that if you do have questions, and we'll have several more meetings about the budget. We've got May the 8th will be the public hearing. You can sign up now if you want. The public wants to come and weigh in on May the 8th. We'll also have meetings on the 10th and the 24th before the final vote on June 12th. And that's when the council will vote on next year's budget. So if council members have questions or concerns, Kim Eagle is taking those by email, and obviously we'll have more time to discuss. So I think that's the update on how we're going to proceed tonight, and that's the rest of the schedule. We look forward to having a lot of good discussions starting now and encourage the public to weigh in with your council member after you hear the presentation today, and any questions and concerns we have a little over a month to have that discussion. And with that, I'm going to turn the meeting over to the chair of our budget committee, and that's Councilmember Greg Phipps.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all, everyone. After 3 budget workshops and 6 budget committee meetings for this fiscal year 2018 budget development process, today the city manager is going to deliver his proposed budget, and the emphasis is on the word proposed, because as the mayor has already suggested, we're going to be still, even after the night, we're going to be getting additional input, and we also have our budget adjustments and straw votes to go through, so everyone will have a chance to weigh in as we move to the final budget. I'd like to thank the other members of the budget committee and the mayor and council for excellent discussions during this budget process, and just to briefly highlight the members of the budget committee and myself, as the committee chair, and Ed Driggs, who's recuperating as the vice chair. He's not with us tonight, but I know he's observing these proceedings on TV. We also have Councilmember Lyles, Kinsey, and Mayfield round out the budget committee team. I also like to thank the staff for all of the work that they've done to get us to this point. I was just remarking to Ms. Ashmira, I don't know how many of these budget books we have, but it's always good to have another budget book.
That's it, because I came with this one.
Not too bad.
Okay. Just like every other budget cycle, the city council is going to face some very difficult choices in the development of our final 2018 budget. The final budget decisions we make over the next month will help address community challenges and poise Charlotte to become the winning city of tomorrow. Now, we have a very strong foundation to serve as the basis for our 2018 budget development process. First, we have our community letter that we released earlier, in the fall of last year, and as you can see all through this process that we've been talking about, how what we are doing just interrelates and just collaborates what we are trying to do in our community letter. So a lot of this will be focusing on that, and I'm sure the manager will be highlighting that as we go through it. Secondly, we have the 15 finance and budget principles that we've adopted a while ago that brings integrity and transparency to our budget process. The third foundational tool, we have the focus area plans, which they were adopted in 2018 and go out to 2019, so we have a good foundational stepping stones on which to move forward with. And the fourth foundational tool that we have comes from our council retreat at the end of January. As we know, we had a good some presentations from John Martin, presented a compelling presentation on the things we do to continue to position ourselves as the winning city of tomorrow. So without further ado, and just to jump right into his presentation, I'd like to turn this meeting over now to Mr. Jones, who's delivering his first budget presentation to the City Council as our new city manager. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Phipps.
Okay.
I almost feel like we need to clap for him.
Thank you, that's it.
My expectations.
I really appreciate, it is a great privilege to be your city manager. I think back to the fall when I was offered the job. I talked about this amazing city. I talked about being a part of the legacy of the city. And over the course of the last 5 months, I have been greater enthusiasm about those thoughts, about how great this city is and how great a team that we have. So what we'll attempt to do for the next, I'll say 15 minutes, because after about 15 minutes, it's no longer my proposed budget. I'll turn it over to the mayor and the council, and we'll work very hard to try to close the gap in terms of any issues that we may have missed in this budget. So as we started to build the budget, we looked at our past successes and we acknowledged the current opportunities and challenges, but we really tried to focus on the future. So next year will be the 250th anniversary of Charlotte. Okay? So when you start to think about 250 years, there's a lot to learn from that. But we're going to focus on the next 250 years, and we hope that the FY 2018 budget gives us that start with those principles that Mr. Phipps talked about earlier. So we start off by trying to connect the dots. So we all know that council has 5 focus areas that have been the bedrock of budget development throughout the years. But also we want to add to that the work of the Opportunity Task Force, 91 recommendations that are going to be not just related to the city, but also to the school system and also to the county. So how do we connect the dots from the 5 focus areas to the recommendations from the Opportunity Task Force, but also, as Mr. Phipps said earlier, the retreat that occurred back in January, where the mayor and council traveled to Raleigh to really try to see how we can build bridges as we go into the future. And we had a great discussion with John Martin, who talked about those 10 traits for winning cities. So we know that by 2050, almost 70% of the world's population is going to live in cities. So how can we prepare ourselves to be one of those winning cities where we attract and retain talent? So I'll just talk about a few of those traits, because I think what you'll see is that they come out throughout the process tonight. It's that positive buzz. It's a shared story. It's affordable spaces. It's beyond borders. And we talk about beyond borders. It's not just the city. It's really the urban, rural, suburban connections, not divide, but connections. And lastly, the big tent. How do we make sure that there's opportunity for everyone? So we take those 10 winning traits, but in the center of the presentation, you'll see the letter to the community. So in the short term, what we're trying to do with this budget is have a laser focus on the letter to the community that talked about 3 key areas: safety, trust, and accountability, access to safe, quality, and affordable housing, and lastly, good paying jobs. So you'll see throughout this presentation that we try to connect everything back in the short term to the letter to the community. So what do we know? We know that Charlotte is growing. We know that by 2040, we're going to add 400,000 more people and have a population of close to 1.2 million. That's like adding a Raleigh or adding a Cleveland or Minneapolis to Charlotte. So how we plan for the future is extremely important. We know the trends are positive. Tourism is on the rise. Construction is booming. Residential real estate market is recovering, and jobs and wages are trending up. So what we also know is that all residents must share in this success. Often when I talk with staff and we meet, we talk about shocks and stresses. So acute shocks are like an earthquake or a hurricane or maybe even a riot. They're things that cities are equipped to address when they happen. But there's also chronic stresses that happen over decades. And I think that we find ourselves trying to address that also. So when we think about chronic stresses, there's poverty or high unemployment, in particular demographics or in certain neighborhoods. So with this budget, how do we begin to make sure that everyone can share in the success of the winning city of the future? So just putting it graphically, if we're building a bridge, let's make sure that everyone has opportunity in terms of good paying jobs, safety communities, and affordable housing. So the first step is to look at the resources that we have in the 2018 budget, and we believe initially we have aligned those resources with the letter to the community. So let's start off with safety, trust, and accountability. So in terms of the blue dot, we're going to talk about the operating budget, and the yellow dot, we're going to talk about the capital budget. The capital budget will expand 5 years, so 2018 through 2022. In terms of the operating budget, we are providing additional staff and resources in the area of safety, trust, and accountability, in the area of affordable housing, and in the area of good paying jobs. And we'll go into more detail throughout the presentation. On the capital side, we are adding $22 million in terms of that safe health, the safety, trust, and accountability category. In terms of affordable housing, $6 million that we're adding to the budget in that area. And in terms of good paying jobs, about $8.5 million. Again, we'll talk a little bit more in detail on each one of those. So, as Mr. Phipps talked about earlier, those 15 principles, those guiding principles with putting a budget together or developing a budget. And I would say that principle number 3 is that the budget needs to be structurally balanced. So we start off with a $2.4 billion budget that's structurally balanced. So we say ongoing revenue matches ongoing expenditures. Extremely important. So if we start to look at all funds, so what's important, we have a $2.4 billion budget. Roughly a quarter of that budget is the general fund, which we'll spend the bulk of tonight talking about. But another 60% are the enterprise funds. And remember, with enterprise funds, they have to be self-supporting, so the revenue has to match the expenditures. So let's talk a little bit about the enterprise funds. You know, many times we save this for the end of the presentation, so you may see Brent and John and Barry and Jennifer kind of jump up and down because we're talking about the enterprise funds early on. So let's talk a little bit about aviation, and these are reasons for optimism. So in aviation, the 5th busiest airport in terms of movement operations, and 16.2 billion regional impact. So when we start to think about aviation, CATS, and water, these are regional entities that goes beyond just the borders of Charlotte. So great job, Brent. As a matter of fact, I believe you just got a recent upgrade that I think I can say publicly, so great job with the airport. The CATS, $1.2 billion Blue Line extension, they'll open in FY18 in this next fiscal year. Great job, John. Water, almost $1 billion of investment going into the water system. Thank you, Barry. And stormwater, with the key to maintain and enhance our stormwater and improve the quality of streams and wetlands. Jennifer's doing a great job. So let's now go into the general fund, all right? So about 25% of this $2.4 billion budget is the general fund, and that too is structurally balanced, so extremely important for us in terms of the general fund. So I know the question is, okay, what's the increase? So about 5.3% increase in FY18 from FY17. So we're talking the resource side, the revenue side, okay? The bulk of that, about 2/3 of that increase, comes from base and natural growth in property tax and in sales tax. No increase tax rates, that's just base and natural growth. So about $20 million of this $33 million in additional revenue is coming from those two sources, which are really the biggest drivers of the revenue for our budget. On the expenditure side, and again, aligning with those 15 budget principles, in principle number 4, which deals with compensating our employees in such a way that we can attract and retain them. The bulk of the expenditures with this additional revenue is related to compensation and benefits or the public safety salary increases, and that's almost 80% of the additional spending on the operating side. So what are the building blocks for the FY 2018 budget? Well, we start off with that, remember that vision, that winning city of the future. But underpinnings of that is, let's make sure that we're promoting economic opportunity for all, that we become this employer of choice, and that we build community through safe, healthy, inclusive, and prosperous communities. And in the middle of that, a piece of it is having a well-managed government, and a piece of that is making sure that we address the letter to the community in the short term. So the well-managed government. So fiscal sound leadership, and this predates me, which is excellent, okay? So when we start to think about those 15 principles with putting a budget together, they're exceptional. We talked about a couple of them, but the 15th one is pretty important also, and that is to maintain the top credit ratings. And I will say that by adhering to these principles, we have had 44 consecutive years of having a AAA bond rating. That means when we have to borrow money, we can borrow money at the least cost. So that's exceptional for a city to have a AAA bond rating. I will tell you that we can talk about the FY18 budget all night long, and we're not going to be able to have the resources meet the demands that are out there. Even with this budget, I can tell you there were $32 million of additional requests coming from the departments that we did not fund. So we are always in this position where resources are not in line with demand. So how do we begin to address that? Well, the first thing is that we talk a great deal about a day in Charlotte, and that's great. It's great to see what some outputs are. So we know how many firefighters are on duty any particular day. We also know how many houses we are receiving solid waste from on a particular day. But what we want to do, and Assistant City Manager Kim Eagle is going to take the lead on this, is how can we really start to change this conversation from these inputs and these outputs to really outcomes. So if the outcomes are to have this, or if an outcome is to have safe, healthy, and inclusive communities, what are we doing with the resources to make sure that we do that? So over the course of the next year, Kim will look at all of the data that we receive as a city and see if there's a better way of making sure that we are responding to the community. Also, in terms of addressing increased demand, it's an opportunity for us to maximize revenue, reduce expenditures, identify efficiencies, grow the economy, and share services. So Deputy City Manager Sabrina Joy Hogg is going to, over the course of the next year, also look at internally, what do we do? Are there some opportunities for us to do more collaboration between departments? So before we would ever come back to the council with a recommendation on the revenue side, we have to make sure that on the expenditure side, we are doing the best that we can do is in terms of stewards of the public purse. We're going to realign our support to make sure that it's consistent with the focus areas. So there's a big commitment to community engagement in this budget, which you will see throughout the budget. And we started off by having the Department of Neighborhood and Business Services, and we did this early this year, propose it to council knowing that it would have to be approved in the FY18 budget. But to break that into two departments, one is housing and neighborhood services, and the other being economic development, so that we can have a laser focus in each one of those departments to be able to make sure that we are making progress, not only in that long-term vision, but in the short term. But also what we're doing is we're trying to make sure that we have a consistent brand throughout the city. And that's extremely important. That's what John Martin has been working with us on. And one thing that we've learned is how can we better collaborate with our partners, whether it's the regional authority or Charlotte Center City or the Chamber or CRVA. To some extent, we're all marketing. And whether we're marketing, whether it's for somebody who's 50 miles out or somebody who lives here, if we go back to those 10 traits of a winning city, having that shared story and that positive buzz is important. So over the course of these deliberations, as well as next year, we're trying to find a way to have a more unified brand, because we believe that beyond borders, even when you look at the regional authority, there are multiple jurisdictions in 2 states, and there's still this opportunity for us to be more collaborative, because we're not just competing against each other, we're competing against regions across the world. So the presentation overview, the remaining part of the presentation, it's really going to focus on the community letter and focus on building community through strong neighborhoods. So in terms of building community through strong neighborhoods, there are 3 big takeaways here. One, as I indicated earlier, we created the Housing and Neighborhood Services Department, and Pam Weidman, I'm going to say it for the second time. I think the first time maybe we didn't get the response because we were, moving fast, but Pam's great. And we truly believe that Pam is the right person, both on the housing side and on the neighborhood side also. So we believe that's going to really help us build those strong neighborhoods. And we are renewing our emphasis on community engagement. So there are many departments that are out there engaging with the community, but sometimes we don't have that consistent message across departments. So that's a great opportunity for us. And we're also implementing a neighborhood-focused approach to problem solving. So what are we doing within the neighborhoods? I think the most important, hey, that's great. Thank you. Thanks, Sandy. I think the most important slide in the neighborhood area is dealing with additional funds that we're putting into neighborhoods now, okay? So this isn't something in the future. This is listening to the council and making sure, in terms of safety, it's not just how many additional police officers that we hire, but their streets, their sidewalks, their pedestrian crossings. So I talked early on about a 5-year CIP, but I'm going to start off with just year 1. Okay, in FY18, there's $11 million in this budget to go into neighborhoods. Okay, $6 million of that is related to the neighborhood transportation safety corridors. $3 million of that is for neighborhoods throughout the city, and another $1.4 million of that is from an ADA sidewalk enhancements throughout the city. So we have more than $10 million now in this budget, not in 2019 or 2022, that we can put into neighborhoods immediately. Code enforcement's important, okay? So also in this budget, while there's $2.8 million currently that helps us with code enforcement, we're also adding another $525,000, about $100,000 a year over the 5-year period, to make sure that we have enhancements as it relates to existing housing stock or eliminating deteriorating housing stock. So code enforcement is something that we've heard, and so we've freed up additional capacity to address some of the code enforcement issues. And lastly, one of the great programs we have is the neighborhood matching grants. So in this budget, we have the capacity to free up another $75,000 a year over each of the 5 years of the CIP for the neighborhood matching grant program. We have $1.6 million in there now, but this is allowing for another $75,000 a year each year of the 5-year CIP. So this map, it really just says it's all over the city. So we're not taking these funds and just centralize them in 1 or 2 places. There's opportunities throughout the city, and I'm sure that during the council budget deliberation process, you would like to know where the streets and the sidewalks are, and we'll make sure that we get information to you on that. A big tent, one of those traits of a winning city. So in terms of having a big tent, we are diverse. 16% of the Charlotte population is born outside of the United States, and we all know that it's in terms of Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, We represent 158 countries and 175 native languages. So what's important is that we've been given data over time, and I'm not sure that we've shared that data with the council and with the community. Some of that data comes from the 2015 Immigration and Integration Task Force report. In 2016, there was a work group of employees that were charged with implementing the recommendations from the task force. And there's a little bit more progress than I had expected, but there's still work to do. That's why within the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Services, that has its division, that has the division that deals with welcoming individuals, we're adding one additional person, and that one additional person will help with implementing those recommendations from the task force that we can do, those that are in accordance with state and federal law. But what's important is that we'll have somebody that is their job daily is to be that individual who helps all new Charlotteans as they become a part of our community. I think it's also important to make sure that we're engaging residents and creating that positive buzz. We talked about the Civic Leadership Academy, the first one that we had this year, and the whole goal there is to have citizens gain a better understanding of what happens in Charlotte. It was a great success, the first class. We're proposing adding $25,000 to this program so we can have additional classes that relate to the Citizens Leadership Academy. And I've already spoken about the additional money for the neighborhood matching grants. Safety, trust, and accountability. I think the most important aspect here with the safety, trust, and accountability is that this budget makes true the 2-year commitment to add 125 police officers. So in this budget, the remaining 62 police officers are funded, but the big picture is the commitment a year ago to do 125 over 2 years. So that commitment is met, and there's additional resources, civilian resources, to help those officers do their job, as well as over $4 million in equipment to help them do their job also. We also have, in terms of a fire, we have Engine Company 65 at Station 42 at Eastland, that's a part of this budget, and we will continue to attract and retain great law enforcement officers through our pay plan adjustments. I just want to talk just a little bit about some of the community outreach initiatives that are under this umbrella of safety, trust, and accountability. A lot of times we talk about the additional police officers, but I do want to give some credit to a lot of the programs that we don't talk about enough. So the community safety town hall forums, where Chief Putney is out there talking about what occurs on a day-to-day basis, and then he takes a Q&A from the audience. Cops and kids learn Spanish, so this allows for better communication between our police officers and the youth. And what I find amazing is that the youth are teaching the police officers Spanish, so it's not the other way around. So it's another opportunity for collaboration. Transparency workshops, they're 3-day events that have community members understanding police operations. And the juvenile diversion program is just amazing. It started 4 years ago. We've had 2,000 youth accept this opportunity for a second chance. 83% of these youth had a successful completion, and 92 of those who successfully completed haven't committed another crime. So I think that's extremely important when we start to think about our community engagement. And again, the neighborhood problem solving, which is in housing and neighborhood services, is excellent. And Willie just does a great job in terms of mediation services from community relations. Affordable housing. So we know that the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development has talked about this 34,000 deficit in affordable housing units. So what we're trying to do is address both the short term, the 5,000 units in 3 years, but also the longer term goal too. So how do we do that? So by building this investment in affordable housing, we start off by the creation of the department, but also the $6 million, $2 million in FY18, and then $1 million in 19, $1 million in 20, 21, and 22 for $6 million. But again, this is over and above the trust fund. These are additional dollars to help with being innovative as we try to address the goal. So the goal, 5,000 units, where are we? Unless something changed since early today, yes, okay, so we're at 1,876, a third of the way there for the 3-year goal of getting to 5,000. And if the question is to Pam, are we going to get there? Absolutely. So what we'll do is continue to use not just the four-pronged approach that we talked about earlier this year, but see if we can use these additional funds to be a bit more innovative and take some opportunities to partner with the private sector, to partner with the faith-based organizations, to partner with anybody who will partner with us in order to make sure that we can reach that goal. Good paying jobs. So creating good paying jobs is another part of the letter to the community. As I mentioned earlier, first, we created the Department of Economic Development. We also now have $5 million over the next 5 years for the business corridor revitalization. And what we will do over the course of the first year is make sure that the program is getting the outcome that the council wants it to have. So Deborah Campbell and staff are going to work with how do we look at the program to get the greatest outcome for the dollars. So that's $5 million over a 5-year period. And then we have $3 million to support the completion of the North Tryon redevelopment project. And lastly, we have additional dollars for some of the programs we have in the city. The programs in the city really are dealing with career pathways for both youth and adults. So in terms of youth education and job skill training, we have so many programs, and one of the things that we believe is important is to start coordinating those programs. First of all, we need to talk about the programs, but secondly, more importantly, how can we coordinate those programs? So we're adding 2 additional staff to help us, especially in the areas of the Mayor's Youth Employment Program, the Youth Council, the Mentoring Alliance. If we're coming in contact with 35,000 youth each year through city-funded programs, are there opportunities to get that reach even further? We also have apprenticeship opportunities, and we know about Project Peace. As a matter of fact, that was that first $1 million from the community letter that was put in to help with creating good jobs, good paying jobs. We also believe that as an employer of choice, there are some opportunities for the city too to have its apprenticeship program. So we have 2 additional staff in human resources that's going to help coordinate all of these apprenticeship programs, both in the general fund and enterprise funds, not just $680 million worth of programs, but $2.4 billion, the entire budget. So that's important. We're going to start with 25. We believe between the airport and water that we're already there, with a goal of having 50 apprenticeships by June 2018. And I want to talk a little bit about collaboration that's really hot off the press. And so I want to thank Dr. Joel English, who's from Centura College, and Brent Cagle from the airport, and also Kevin Dick from Economic Development, because they've been working together to take this concept of if we have opportunities, or if there are a lack, or if we can see in the future that we may not have people with skill sets to match jobs, how can we take care of that career path early on? And we found that this new FAA Certified Aviation Mechanic Training Program provides that opportunity. So what's going to happen? They're scheduled to open early 2018, serve 500 students annually, estimated to have a salary of about $46,000 upon completion. And the reason that I'm telling you this tonight is because Dr. English has committed to providing 2 scholarships to Charlotte residents in this program. And that's a start. Dr. English. Thank you. All right.
Okay, we're gonna clap that.
So I'll bring it home with becoming an employer of choice. So it's normally at this time we talk about salary increases. So yes, the budget principle number 4, to make sure that we stay competitive with attracting and retaining employees. We have a 3% broadband merit increase and a 2% market increase for officers. So that's what you expect. Sometimes what's not expected is how do you develop career development for our employees. So we're spending a great deal of time creating career pathways. It's one thing to attract somebody and have them here. We like to keep our talented people here. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about choice for healthcare, which is extremely important, and giving employees opportunities. So I talked a little bit about the broadband. I talked a little bit about the non-exempt pay plan, as well as the public safety pay plan and the changes there. Healthcare, we do have healthcare, which the overall cost is about 3%. That's down from the 9% when we started talking about the budget back in January. So kudos to the entire staff to get those costs down. But what I find more intriguing is that we have an opportunity with multiple plans, 5 plans, for individuals to select plans where they would pay less in 18 than they paid in 17. So that'll take a lot of discussions, a lot of work with our staff, but the Human Resources Office is well equipped to start to put that together. But we believe that that's a great opportunity for us to continue to be an employer of choice. And also we want to set the example. As we started to talk about this minimum pay for our employees, right now we're at $13.58 an hour. The goal for council was to get to $15 an hour by 2020. I'm pleased to say that this budget has the capacity to get to $15 an hour in the upcoming budget, FY18. I have been doing this for 18 years and I've never had an applause. So this is okay. So the final 2 slides. So just a breakdown, and we did this intentionally. We wanted to go through the programs and what we're doing before we went to just the number chart. So we've gone through this. So we do have this $2.4 billion budget. We've talked about the general fund, and we've also talked about the enterprise funds. So in terms of the proposed budget with all funds, the general fund, there's no tax increase, okay? There is a solid waste fee increase of about 50 cents a month. And the reason why the solid waste fee increase is needed is because as we start to talk about those enterprise funds, solid waste was not in it. So there's not enough revenue that comes in to pay for the services. So the general fund subsidizes solid waste. All we're doing in this recommendation is the increase in the tip fee and the costs that are passed on to the city. We're passing those costs on to the consumer. So that's 50 cents a month, $6 for the entire year. That's solid waste. Aviation, we will remain the lowest per employment passenger rate among all the major hubs. The Charlotte area transit system, there's no fare increase. The stormwater, there's no rate increase. And Charlotte Water has a $1.73 a month rate increase. So those are all the increases throughout their entire budget. Looking ahead, we want to build on our branding and marketing. We want to make sure we revise our performance management strategy, and we want to conduct internal service reviews to make sure that we're operating as efficiently and as effectively as we possibly can. We want to evaluate services and programs with 5 ways of looking at this: examining revenue, reducing expenditures, becoming more efficient, growing the economy, and sharing services. And we want to also analyze our relationship with our outside partners. So for the upcoming calendar, as the mayor mentioned earlier, May 8th is the public hearing. May 10th is the council budget adjustments. May 24th is the council straw vote, with the council adopting the budget on June 12th. So I just want to, as I turn this budget over to the mayor and council, I want to thank Kim Eagle, who's worn a couple of hats over the course of the last 6 months. And I also want to thank the entire budget staff for working so hard, including this weekend, to pull this all together. So if it's okay with the mayor and council, could I just get the budget staff to stand so we
Yes,
could
please
applaud
do.
them for
Please.
their hard work? So with that said, I will turn the proposed budget over to you, Mayor, and council, and we'll work hard to make sure that we get any questions addressed so that you'll be able to approve it in June. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Manager. And that is the extent of our meeting this evening. We'll have a lot more discussions. Again, our thanks to the budget staff. We haven't seen these folks in a while. Now we know why. But it's great to have everybody here. And thanks again to all those listening. We look forward to the public's input. And great meeting. Thank you so much. And our commissioner, budget chair, do you want to have any final comments?
Yeah, tomorrow morning, we'll be rolling this budget out for public comment and public input, starting tomorrow morning at 8:30 at the Tuesday Morning Breakfast Club. It's been an annual ritual of ours. I think this will be the 3rd straight year that we've done that. So if y'all could want to come out to the Belmont Center in the morning, and we'll have the team to lay out very similar the budget proposal and get feedback at that time.
Okay.
Is it online
Your
yet,
motion?
Mr. Manager?
Online.
Almost.
Okay.
Okay.
It'll be online very soon for the public. Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Okay.